Assalamu alaikum class 4. It's our fifth lecture of English A. So today we are going to study New Oxford Modern English book 4. First of all, open page number 14. Mention the date at the top of the page. Unit 2, Pip meets a convict. Words to know: battery, a Ford; blacksmith, a person who creates tools and objects out of metal; churchyard, that the area around a church used for burials, usually full of tombstones; coarse, rough; convict, prisoner; file, a metal tool with a rough edge or surface, used for cutting or smoothing hard material; grub, a slang word for food; marsh, a wetland area by water, usually covered in small plants; nettles, a weed that stings skin when touched; orphan, a child whose parents are dead; ravenously, eating fast due to greed or hunger; tombstone, a large flat stone standing on lead or over a grave; weathercock, a device in the shape of a cockerel used to show which way the wind is blowing; wilderness, a natural space that has not been shaped living in by people. Now we will start the reading. My father's family name is Pirip and my first name is Philip, but as a child I could not say either, so I called myself Pip, and then so did everyone else. So his family name is Pirip and first name is Philip, but it is difficult for him to pronounce both, so he called himself Pip, and everyone else also called him Pip. I say that my name is Pirip because that's what is written on my father's tombstone, and it is what my sister told me. My sister is married to the blacksmith, and he said that his name is Pirip because it is written on his father's tombstone, and his sister told him too. His sister is married to the blacksmith. We lived in a marshy area down by the river, a few miles from the sea. One day I stood in the churchyard and looked over my parents' tombstone at the dark flat wilderness beyond the churchyard. So they live in marshy area down the river from the sea. One day he was in churchyard and looked over his parents' tombstone in a churchyard. The marshes were crisscrossed with ditches and mounds. In the distance I could see the grey line of the river, and then far away the sea. It was a cold day. So the marshes were crisscrossed, ditches and mounds, and he could see the grey line of the river, and then far away the sea. It was a cold day. The grey land and the grey sky made me feel sad. I suddenly realized that I was an orphan, and I began to cry. So the grey land and the grey sky made him feel sad, and he suddenly realized that he is orphan, and he started crying. "Hold your noise," cried a terrible voice. It came from a man who had just stepped out from behind a gravestone. "Keep still, or I will cut your throat." So when he was crying, a terrible voice cried, "Dad, hold your noise. Stop making noise." It came from a man who stepped out from behind a gravestone, and what he said, that "I will cut your throat." This man was frightening. He was dressed in rough grey clothes, and he had a big iron chain on his leg. So the man was frightening. He was dressed in a rough grey clothes, had a big iron chain on his leg. So in this picture we can see the chain on his legs and his grey dress. He was an escaped convict. His shoes were broken, and he had an old rag tied round his head. So he was in he was in prisoner, escaped from the prison. His shoes were broken, and he had an old rag tied round his head. So he had rag around his head. He was dirty from being soaked in the muddy water from the ditches, and he was dirty because he was soaked in the water from the ditches. He was covered in scratches from nettles and stones. He limped and shivered and glared and growled. His teeth chattered in his head as he seized me by the chin. Oh, don't cut my throat, sir, I pleaded in terror. So Pirip screamed, don't cut my throat. Tell me your name, said the man, quick. So the man asked, tell me your name, hurry up. So he said, Pip, sir. Once more, said the man, staring at me louder. So he again shouted it, what's your name? Tell me louder. So he said, Pip, Pip, sir. Show me where you live, said the man. Point out the place. So the man asked, where do you live? Point out the place. I pointed to where our village lay, a mile from the church. So he pointed towards his village, a mile from church. The man looked at me closely. Then he turned me upside down and emptied my pockets. So the man looked closely at him and turned him upside down, emptied his pockets. There was nothing in them but a piece of bread. So there was nothing in his pocket except a piece of bread. The upside down view of the church righted itself when he placed me on a high tombstone. I sat trembling while he ate the bread ravenously. So he took him and placed him on the high tombstone, and he was eating the bread piece. Now look here, said the man, where are your parents? There, sir, said I. So the man asked, where are your parents? The man jumped and made a short run, but then he stopped and looked over his shoulder. So he pointed towards his parents' grave. The man jumped and made a short run, but then he stopped and looked over his shoulder. There, sir, I timidly said, pointing to the tombstone. So he pointed towards the tombstone. Timidly mean Khawfzada. Oh, said the man, so who do you live with? If I let you live, which I haven't made up my mind about. My sisters, sir, Mrs. Joy Gregory, wife of Joy Gregory, the blacksmith, sir. So the man asked, with whom you live? If I let you live, about which I haven't made my mind. So the boy replied, Dad, with my sister, wife to the blacksmith. Blacksmith, said he, and looked down at his leg. So by hearing blacksmith, he looked down at his leg. After looking at his leg and me several times, he took me by both arms and tilted me back as far as he could hold me. So he tilted him as far as he could. Then he stared into my eyes. Now look here, he said, I need to decide if I will let you live. Do you know what a file is? So the man said that I have decided that if I let you live. Do you know what is file? So now he is demanding for file. Walaikum class 4. It's our 5th lecture, part 2. Yes, sir. And you know what grub is? Yes, sir. So the man asked, Dad, what a file is? So Pirip replied, that I know, sir. And do you know what grub is? So he said yes. After each question he tilted me over a little more. This made me feel helpless. I was in danger. Grub mean kana, tilted mean jukana. So after each question he tilted him more, and he was in danger. You get me a file, he tilted me again. and you get me grub. He tilted me again. So he asked for file and grub, and he tilted him again. You bring them both to me. He tilted me again, or I will have your heart and liver out. He tilted me again. So he said, if you don't bring them both, he will take your heart and liver out of you. And he tilted him again. I was dreadfully frightened and hoped that he would not drop me. So he was frightened. He was frightened that he would not drop him from there. I clung to him with both hands. So he clung to him with both hands. Clung means chamatna. He dipped me backwards and rolled me round, so that the church seemed to jump over its own weathercock. Then, still holding me up on the tombstone, he went on. Early tomorrow morning, bring that file and the grub. You bring the load to me at that old battery over there. If you do it and you don't say a word about me, I will let you live. If you fail or say anything at all about me, then your heart and your liver shall be torn out, roasted and eaten. Now I am not alone. There's a young man hiding with me. In comparison with him, I am an angel. So he demanded for file and grub, and he said that you have to bring me that, and you should not utter even a word about me. If he did, I will take out your heart and liver, and they will be roasted and eaten by me and the other young men in the battery. So he said that in comparison with me, he is in the convict is an angel. The young man can hear us now. That young man has a secret way of getting at a boy and at this heart and his liver. So the convict said that young man can hear us now, and he has a secret way to get your heart and liver out. A boy cannot hide himself. From that young man, a boy may lock his door, may be warm in bed, may tuck himself up, may draw the clothes over his head, may think himself comfortable and safe, but that young man will softly creep his way to him and tear him open. And he said that you cannot hide himself from that young man. He will reach to you and will tear you up. I am keeping that young man from harming you at the present time with great difficulty. I find it very hard to hold that young man of your inside. Now what to do? What do you say? So he said that I am keeping that young man from harming you at present moment with great difficulty. It's very difficult to hold that young man. Now what do you say? I was so frightened, but I said that I would get him the file, and I would get him what broken bits of food I could, and I would come to him at the battery early in the morning. So he was so frightened, and he said that I would get him. I will bring him file and bits of food. Promise on your life, said the man. I promise, and he took me down from the top of the tombstone. So he took a promise from Pip and took him down from the tombstone. Now he went on, remember that promise and remember that young man and get home. So he said that remember that promise and young man and go to your home. Good night, sir, I stammered. Stammered mean haklana. So he stammered. It is going to be a long night for me, said he. He looked at the cold, wet, flat marsh. I wish I was a frog or an eel. So he said that it is going to be a long and terrible night for him. And he looked at the cold, wet marsh. and there was frog and eel in it, and he wished that he would be a frog or an eel. Eel mean machli, frog mean mendak. He hugged his shuddering body in both his arm as if to hold himself together, and limped towards the low church wall. Limp mean langra, and he moved towards the low church wall. He got over it slowly like a man whose legs were numbed and stiff. Stiff means sakht, numbed means sun, and then turned round to look for me, and then he turned to look for him. When I saw him turning, I was frightened again and ran home without stopping. When he looked back at him again, he was frightened, and he ran from that place without stopping. So this is the end of our chapter. Thank you and Allah Hafiz.